Hey, welcome back guys. This is Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports in Westfield, Indiana. Starting a new segment called Gun Counter Talk, which we would just be talking about gun politic concepts. I have a lot of customers coming in just wanting to chat about these sorts of things, maybe wanting to learn more information about them, or maybe just wanting to kind of rant about them. Anyway, so we thought we'd just bring those topics to our YouTube channel so our customers and anybody else can come along and take a look. Today we're going to be talking about the NFA and the HPA, that's the National Firearms Act and the Hearing Protection Act. Basically what those concepts are and why they're important today. I'm going to go through a timeline-based history on both suppressors and the NFA as a whole, so you can get a more visualized concept idea of what those are and why they're important today. Maybe you'll learn something, or maybe you know all about this stuff and you just want to hear somebody talk about it. I don't know. Anyway, if that sounds interesting to you, stick around. We'll jump into this now. Alright guys, you see these two timelines that I've kind of crudely drawn. Up here we have the timeline of the NFA, and down here we have the timeline of the HPA. They're both going to start at the year 1900, which I'll put on there. My handwriting is awful. Okay, and they're going to end at the year, switch over to here. They're going to end in the year 2017. That's where we are now. Okay, so let's go ahead and start up here with the NFA. So many people say, okay, why was the NFA enacted? So in 1929, we had the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. So when Congress was talking about enacting the NFA, the National Firearms Act, that was one of the reasons that was commonly stated. And if anybody knows, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre was when several of these gangsters killed several of those gangsters with fully automatic Thompsons, created a massive scene. It was more of a media spectacle. Law enforcement didn't care so much because it wasn't police being killed, it was other gangsters. So it didn't have a whole lot of like a law enforcement impact. And actually, as you can see, it happened in the year 1929, and we'll get into this. It wasn't even talked about in government or any branch of the government, really until the discussions of the NFA being enacted, which happened in 1934, which we'll get to in a minute. So the next thing that happens here in the year 1933 is Roosevelt is attempted assassination. Okay, so attempted that's kind of funny. We'll leave it. So in 1933, there's an attempted assassination on Roosevelt. And this is kind of the thing that sparked, of course, talks about the NFA. And of course, it was a knee-jerk reaction, of course, as most governmental reactions are, because the attempted assassination was with a .38 caliber revolver. And Roosevelt wasn't hit, but I think one of his aides was, who blocked his shot, who ended up dying, unfortunately. But did not happen with the machine gun, did not happen with the suppressor, did not happen with the short-barreled rifle, did not happen with the short-barreled shotgun. But this is commonly one of the main reasons cited for why they started talks about the NFA, as well as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, which happened, of course, 4 years later. And we'll go ahead and just throw this in here. So this is the year 1934, just 1 year later, when the NFA is passed. So basically what the NFA is, so the NFA is passed in 1934, which puts a heavy tax burden, $200 at the time, which is I think equivalent to like $4,000 today. Correct me if I am wrong on that. It puts a heavy tax burden on NFA items which were deemed to be machine guns, suppressors, short-barreled rifles, and short-barreled shotguns. That was a way of, pricing lower-income people out of being able to buy them. They couldn't outright ban them because of the Constitution. So if you are caught today, and this is true since 1934 to today, if you are caught today with an unregistered machine gun or suppressor or anything like that, what I mean by unregistered is if it's not on the NFA registry, or if you don't have your accompanying Form 1 or Form 4 or Form 3 in a dealer case, you of course are going to be arrested and going to be tried in federal court for that offense, but it won't be for the simple fact of owning those items, because technically, constitutionally, you're not breaking a law by owning a machine gun on the constitutional level in terms of the actual act of owning the machine gun, but what you are doing is breaking a tax violation. since you didn't pay the $200 tax, they're basically getting you on tax evasion. So that's what you're being tried for if you're caught for one of those. Not possession of a machine gun or a suppressor, you're being tried for tax evasion. So keep that in mind. That's a very clever way to circumvent the law there on the government's part. So the next thing that happens in the world of the NFA is in 1968, the GCA, which is the Gun Control Act, is passed. And basically what the Gun Control Act does, is it bans the further importation of NFA items. Again, machine gun suppressors, SBRs and SBSs, and AOWs, any other weapons, which are like pin guns and belt buckle guns, just kind of weird things like that. It bans further importation of these items. Basically, that really only affected machine guns. So since 1968, the passing of the GCA, machine guns can no longer be imported into this country for, transferable use. So domestic machine guns can still be manufactured, like M16s and things like that. But things that would have been imported, like German MP40s or Norinco-made fully automatic AK-47s or anything like that, can no longer be imported post-1968. So in 1986, FOPA is passed. That is the Firearms Owners Protection Act. It was actually a very pro-gun bill that was passed. I don't remember what the specific advantages were, but I know it was championed by the NRA. There was one clause put in there kind of at the 0 hour. It was an amendment, and it was put in there by William Hughes. And what that basically did is it was slipped in there to basically make the further manufacture of transferable machine guns would be stopped in 1986, and that was known as the Hughes Amendment. So, as you can see, and this really just, again, pertains to machine guns. I know we're here to talk about the HPA, but I'll get to that. So in 1934, machine gun suppressor to SBRs and SBSs are basically, you can still own them, but you have to pay a $200 tax and file tax paperwork with the ATF or the government in order to get that item, and of course pay that tax. In 1968, there could be no further importation of machine guns. In 1986, there could be no further domestic production of machine guns. So this basically stopped all manufacturers of machine guns for the domestic market, thus making the cost of transferable machine guns skyrocket. Now let's get away from that for a second and talk about suppressors. So this is the timeline of suppressors in general and laws surrounding them. So in 1902, Hiram Maxim, that's Hiram Percy Maxim, which is the son of the famous Maxim who built the Maxim machine gun, came out with the first functional prototype of this suppressor. Actually, then it was known as a silencer. So in 1909, they were patented and put into civilian production, but they weren't hugely popular. Remember, at the time, guns themselves weren't as loud, like the .32 caliber, like .32 ACP in 1909 was like the 9mm of today. So that was, very small, low calibers were what was popular then anyway. So guns weren't usually loud. They definitely weren't hearing safe. But you didn't have like the massive calibers of today, at least that was commonly used in the civilian market. Then we know here in 1934, the NFA is passed. Again, why were suppressors added to the NFA? They weren't really used that much in crime, at least to my research. I know machine guns were, but suppressors, I couldn't really find any recorded incidents. There were probably a few suppressors being used in crimes. The main reason people attribute suppressors being added to the NFA is because at the time, there was a very, very large lower class. And what would commonly happen is people would go onto other people's land and poach. And they could do that very late at night or in distant parts of somebody's property where they could get away with it. And they would commonly use suppressors in order to mitigate the risk of being heard while they were poaching. I've never really seen that published anywhere by the government as a reason for why they've added that. I think that's just the most common reason people can think of, because there's really not a whole lot of good reasons why suppressors are on the NFA registry or why they were ever added. So really at all in this time frame, there was no real change in the timeline of suppressors that really changed any type of ruling on the NFA or pricing or anything like that until, of course, 2015, which is when the Hearing Protection Act was introduced. It was shelved. Of course, that was during the Obama administration. The idea was shelved until January of 2017, so we're at 1 in 2017. which was when it was reintroduced. I think it was reintroduced in 2017 as an actual health bill. I could be wrong about that. I just talked with a customer about it, and that's what they thought. I need to research that. But then it was approved to actually go to a vote. I don't know when that's going to happen, and we are currently in the month of March in 2017. So when that happens, I can make an update and hopefully inform people. So to quickly recap, the Hearing Protection Act aims to get suppressors knocked off the NFA registry. Therefore, you will no longer have to pay a $200 tax stamp, and also you will not need to submit a Form 4 in order to get one and have to wait 8 months or longer. You could essentially just walk into a gun store, pick out the suppressor you want, fill out a over-the-counter 4473 background check, and walk out with it. Right here we have a screenshot of congress.gov, which shows the current state of the HPA and basically where it's been going since it was reintroduced in early January. As you can see, it's been bouncing around a whole bunch of different subcommittees, which it will continue to do until it finally goes to a vote, which we don't necessarily know when that'll be. So let's talk about why the Hearing Protection Act is important and why it should pass. So obviously suppressors are an NFA item. We've gone over that. You have to pay a $200 tax in order to get one. Also, one thing we didn't talk about is when you're purchasing an NFA item, you do have to submit a very, very long form called the Form 4 if you want to go like a suppressor, for example, in which case you go to your dealer, fill out your Form 4, you have to submit photos, fingerprint cards. That's now if you have a trust too, you have to do the same thing now due to 41F or 41P, whatever they've decided to call it. That then goes off to the NFA branch of the ATF, and then you don't hear back from your dealer for, I guess right now you're talking about 8 months or so. And then finally you get to come in 8 months later after you've paid for the suppressor and after you've paid the $200 tax stamp. And that's assuming there's no problems on your paperwork and it doesn't get kicked back for any updates or anything like that, which does happen, which could also slow it down. So that's basically putting you on an 8-month hold for you to be able to purchase an item which should not really be regulated, okay? Why should it not be regulated? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and go into this. Hollywood does a really, really good job of making any firearm look more dangerous and lethal and fun, or anything that they can do to make the movie look more entertaining and exciting. Can't really fault them for that. That's what they're there to do. If they're going to try and show machine guns as not as controllable like like something that's like a fully automatic 308, which takes a lot of training to be good with, where like in the movies they shoulder the thing like you're shooting a water gun. It's not going to happen that way. You're literally taking like a firearm that weighs 8 or 9 pounds and putting a 308 through it, shooting at like 700 rounds a minute, and you think it's just going to sit there and stabilize on you okay? So, I mean, things like that, just like think about it a little bit. Same with suppressors. So, the suppressor is basically helping you baffle down the noise of the report of the firearm being discharged. You also have the sonic boom that's being created by the round exiting the firearm, and you're also hearing the actual mechanical operation of the firearm, which is actually pretty loud. You don't actually hear that when you're shooting a gun without a suppressor, typically because the loudness of it actually firing is far superior to the action of the firearm. But the firearm actions are pretty loud. It's not a quiet affair when they're being fired. An average suppressor is going to bring down the volume of your gunshot, and that's assuming, I'm not sure if that's with or without subsonic ammunition. It's probably without. It will bring it down on average about 30 decibels. When the average gunshot, I believe, is around 170 decibels. So you're bringing it down to about the 130 to 140 decibel rating, which, according to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, says that anything over 140 decibels is going to start causing hearing damage. So suppressors just bring the sound of a firearm down to hearing safe. Okay, so let's just talk about that. You're right on the verge of, if we were any louder, we would be causing hearing damage. That's pretty loud. So let's talk about some other things that rate between 110 and 140 decibels. So chainsaws are about as loud. I think they're about 100 decibels. Rock and roll concerts, okay? you're looking, yeah, again, between about 110 and 140 decibels. Next time you go to like a rock and roll concert or something, think about how loud that is, and that's about how loud the gunshot is, even if it's suppressed. So that's kind of cool to think about. A freight train traveling at about 80 miles an hour, about the same volume as a suppressed handgun or suppressed firearm. Rocket engines, okay, pushing up to about 140 decibels. Again, suppressed handgun is about as loud as a rocket engine. Okay, so that's all I have written down here. It's kind of fun facts. So, also let's talk about the size. So when you're talking about adding a suppressor to a handgun, you are making it a lot less concealable. I think people are afraid of like this whole assassin mentality that they're seeing on TV. You're not going to be, let's talk about inner cities, people running around shooting each other with suppressed weapons. Well, first of all, they're becoming a lot less concealable. You're adding a tube about that long onto the end of your handgun, which is about the same length. So you're like doubling the length of your firearm, okay? So you're making it a lot less concealable. Let's talk about, okay, in the movies you see the guy screw the suppressor onto the end of the gun and then they go do the thing, they take the suppressor off and stick it in the pocket. Well, you can't do that. Even after a few shots, the suppressor is going to be like super, super hot and you don't want to put that in your pocket. People will definitely know you have it because you'll be in pain. And also, we've been over this, you're not really quieting it down enough. You're quieting it down to make it hearing safe and not damage your ears, but you're not quieting it down enough to where you can like poke out of a dark alley and shoot somebody and nobody hears you. Okay, that's like coming out and throwing a chainsaw at somebody in the middle of a crowded street. Okay, people are going to hear that and they're going to notice. So you're not quite going to, be the super stealthy, silent person you see in the movies. Also, another thing to consider is in a lot of European countries where sporting is illegal, like hunting is illegal, for example, suppressors are even sometimes not only encouraged, but they are a requirement to dampen back the noise pollution and just as a means of courtesy. So think about that, like in European countries where there is gun control, and anti-gun people love to talk about, gun control in other countries. Suppressors are actually seen as like not a hot topic. It's seen actually to some people, if suppressors are required, they see it as adding a little bit more weight and length to their firearm and a little bit of a nuisance to them. So just think about that too. Also, if you shoot on your property or if you have a neighbor or somebody who shoots on their property and maybe you don't like guns and maybe the noise constantly bothers you, if they had a suppressor that would no longer really be so loud, you might still hear it, but it would dampen down that noise enough to where it might not bother you. Anyway, that's all I have for you guys. Again, our first episode of Counter Talk. So hope you enjoyed it. Please stick around for more. We will be doing more reviews. Come check those out. Please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and we'll probably do one of these about every week. Thanks again.